Hello everybody, this is Mike-EL and G.I.Jolie, and we, through the magic of the supercomputer here, we are speaking to our pal in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, Mike Dell, the parallel world Mike-El, who is joining us through his tablet, right?
Yes.
Yes. We are here today to review a classic comic, Avengers 189. This is going all the way back to 1979. So, Mike Dell, first, you got this out of your personal collection. You have a few comics still laying around from the old days, right?
Yeah, I have about 3 long boxes of old comics, and we were looking for an Avengers issue to review, and I found a couple, and you had the same comic.
It's almost like we're parallel world versions of each other.
I know.
Isn't that funny? So let's ask Julie what her impression of it is at first.
Okay, well, so this is the first ever Avengers comic I've read. And, I've read superhero books, but not team books. This is different than anything that I've ever read, superhero-wise. The way that the story is, I don't know if the word is dated or...
Well, I guess first, Mike, would you say, because you have your own feature on our website, it's called...
Flea Market Fantasy.
And it's Mike Dell reviewing old classic comics from his youth, basically, like the 70s and 80s type thing, right? Compared to those comics, would you say this is typical of that era?
Yeah, I thought it was actually pretty well done for that era, because a lot of times the writing back then would be kind of obvious and not very subtle at all, not a lot of internal conflict, or they overdo the internal. Here, I thought this was kind of sly with what they were doing with Hawkeye. Would you maybe you should summarize the plot for the
Sure.
the people.
Well, it starts off with everyone sort of just wrapping up from the last mission. But then it sort of drifts into Henry Peter Geyrick, who's sort of like a government representative who's on the Avengers because it's kind of a funny subplot. There's a limitation to how many members they can have. And he's sort of trying to control who is in and who is out. So he comes in and basically kicks Hawkeye out of the team, and then Hawkeye is now unemployed, which is kind of, to me, funny because you always kind of wonder, well, these guys are superheroes, they're costume champions, they fight crime, but how do they actually make money? So we find out here that Hawkeye now needs to find a part-time job. And
then it goes into this subplot of Hawkeye finding a job. And then it follows that exploit. Somehow his crime-fighting alter ego, it comes back into play, and he ends up fighting Deathbird.
Well, he gets a job as a security chief at a technology firm.
But as Hawkeye, not as...
Yeah, what if you were Hawkeye and you had the outfit and the bow and I show up in that every time. Yeah, you're getting the job.
He pretty much bullied his way into getting the job, too. He broke in, made them aware of their security flaws, and was like, look, if I can get in, you should probably just hire me, right now.
I just think it's funny how Hawkeye, he shows up with his outfit. He's a former Avenger. He's a superhero. He shows up in costume. He could have any job he wants, pretty much, but he shows up to be the security guy at a nighttime security guy at a warehouse.
And we also should note that the Hawkeye in the comics is a former criminal.
And he's kind of a jerk, a little bit of a jerk.
Definitely. I don't think that the Jeremy Renner version of Hawkeye in the movies is anything like the one in the comics.
No. I actually, when I was reading it, I was like, wow, I don't like this character. He's a bit of a D.
The way this story starts out is we're focused in on Thor, right? And Thor kind of is like, farewell, Iron Man, blah, blah, blah. So then we stick with Thor for about a page, and we're privy to his private thoughts via thought balloons. Then Thor flies by Falcon, and then all of a sudden now we're in Falcon's inner monologue, right? And again, this is interesting because I have other Avengers comics from around this time, and they almost all follow this formula. We're with Captain America for a few pages, and then Captain America will walk by another character, and then now we're with that character, right? It's Captain Marvel or whoever it may be. So it's kind of a dated way of telling the story, but...
you don't think it's a good way to do it, though, with a team book with so many characters, and they're already established characters, so it's... You want to give each one a chance to shine, and I think that's what the movie did so well.
Insofar as writing or the style, there's a lot of team books now, but it's just the way that they approach the breaking up of characters that's very different. And I sort of prefer this a little bit more. It's meatier.
This is actually an example of why I like the old comics, because you get so much. You get to see where Thor is in his head and where he's going, and maybe a little bit of what's going on in his comic. Then we join up with Falcon for about a page, and then he meets up with Iron Man. So I definitely think it's cool. It's definitely an interesting way to do it, because like you said, we get, every character gets their own little chance in the spotlight, right? Now for me personally, my least favorite part of the book is this sort of fight scene with Deathbird, just because that's where it becomes sort of a typical superhero comic.
Definitely. It probably didn't need to be like 5 pages.
Let's talk about the art briefly. Do you want to start off with the art, Mike?
Yeah, let's start with the cover. If everyone can see the cover, it's kind of unique in that there's a lot of...
It looks like a typical magazine cover.
But a lot of words.
I prefer this art over something that's modern because it looks like a costume. It doesn't look like everyone's wearing spandex. Like they just drew the human figure and then drew lines. Like there's actual, like this sleeve is puffy and like these are pants, not tights.
Mike, you wanted to talk about the ads, right? That's one of your favorite things to talk about, eh?
Yeah, I always like to highlight them in the flea market fantasy. At the end of an issue, we always tend to get a Twinkies or Hostess ad. And this issue has Captain Marvel versus Professor Sneer, which I think is interesting.
Like for me, do I want to read more Avengers comics around this era? Yes. This is one of my favorite periods in comics. It's not just, well, maybe it's partly because this is when I grew up reading comics, but I do really like this style. I do like the thought bubbles. I do like the multi-subplots and stuff like that. So I am interested in reading more comics around this era. What about you, Jolie?
For me, it's I will take probably more of an academic approach to it where I will read that for sure. But I would like to also read a current Avengers comic and compare how crappy they are to the old style and how much I probably would prefer the older Avengers comics.
Okay, Mike-EL, does this make you want to read more Avengers?
Oh, absolutely. The art's great. A lot of like superstar characters. If you're looking for a superhero comic book, this is what you want, especially when you're a kid. You get to see Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and they're all together, you know? And that's the great thing about it. And if you keep an eye out for Comic Book Syndicate on the website, maybe there'll be a flea market fantasy of issue 191. Ooh. Which is 2 issues after that.
Nice.
That's why I wish more comics, they still did comic books like this, because I don't really like the new ones when I look at them, but this is my golden era for comics.
Yeah. More substance, definitely. Where can everybody hear your LCS hockey show?
Well, the website is lcshockey.com, and we do it through Blog Talk Radio. So if you just go to blogtalkradio.com and search for LCS, it'll come up.
And it's Friday nights at 9 o'clock, right?
Yeah, we usually do it live Fridays, and then it's available as a podcast throughout the week.
Okay, so thanks again, Mike-EL, for coming out. This is Mike-EL from Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and this is Mike-EL and Jolie from Windsor, Ontario, and this is the Comic Book Syndicate. Thanks again for joining us, guys.
Bye.